Hello, and welcome to part 3 of this 4-part video series on the importance of fixing your gut in order to fix your immune system. So in the previous parts, we learned about how gut dysfunction was closely related in literature to immune conditions, and then we learned which 2 mechanisms in the gut lead to inflammation that serves as a hallmark for these conditions. Now we're going to really start to connect some dots and talk about a proposed mechanism for how the onset of autoimmunity occurs. So in this video, we'll examine one of the most prominent research theories on the pathology of autoimmunity. It frames leaky gut, one of the inflammatory gut conditions that we discussed in part 2, as one of the preconditions necessary for what results in the immune system becoming confused and the autoimmune condition developing to begin with. The proposed mechanism has 3 steps, which we'll go over briefly now, then elucidate in a moment with an example. First, you eat something, and your body fails to properly break down the protein components. This happens more easily with large proteins, like the ones found in gluten, dairy, and eggs. It's no coincidence these are the most common allergenic foods. It has to do with their large protein structure. Next, these big, intact proteins make their way to the intestines, where their size damages the tight junctions and creates those freeways we discussed previously in the gut lining. The proteins sneak out into the bloodstream where they're tagged by the immune system as invaders and are subject to an inflammatory response. Now, some food proteins are molecularly very similar to those in our own tissue. So when this escape happens often enough, the immune cells eventually become confused and cross-react with our bodies, beginning to chronically attack one or more parts of us. A common example of this involves the protein gluten found in wheat and other grains, and the thyroid gland. Thyroid autoimmunity is highly associated with gluten sensitivity. And while gluten sensitivity is associated with many autoimmune conditions, for the thyroid, this is especially the case. In fact, for those with celiac disease, Hashimoto's disease is 4 times higher than in the general population. So why is this? A proposed explanation is via what experts term molecular mimicry. When gluten is consumed in an individual with a leaky gut, the gluten particles leak out into the bloodstream. Once the gluten gets into the bloodstream, its large size means that it may cause an abrasion to the vascular system walls or other structure, and in doing so, it attracts immune cell soldiers patrolling the body, who then tag it as foreign and try to destroy it. The soldiers take a sort of picture of its molecular structure and send out a signal to the other actors in the immune system. You can think of this signal sort of like a wanted flyer, with a sketch artist's interpretation of the criminal included on it. This wanted flyer eventually makes its way to the artillery component of the immune system, informing them to use their toxic chemical weaponry on any compound they run into that looks like this. As the artillery patrols the body, it comes across the thyroid gland, and look, it appears to have a very similar chemical structure, except the chemical structure belongs to the thyroid instead. This is because the molecular structure of gliadin, one of the proteins in gluten, is extremely similar to that of the thyroid proteins. The artillery is fooled and attacks. This results in an inflamed thyroid gland that can cause negative symptoms or even permanent damage that prevents it from functioning properly without exogenous thyroid hormone supplementation. Likewise, many who suffer from thyroid autoimmunity find that removing gluten from the diet can result in meaningful gains in their thyroid-related symptoms, likely because it interrupts this process. To return to our wanted sign metaphor, it's sort of like the sketch artist who depicted the likeness of the criminal only depicted a very specific thing about the wanted person, like that they had a mustache and some glasses. However, this affords the opportunity for confusion if there happen to be other people in the world with mustaches and glasses. While we focused our example on food, this can also occur with chemicals, microbes, or anything that is passing through our GI tract donut holes that manages to somehow get past our structure and into our tissue. Maybe you're wondering, well, why does this happen? As we've covered, having an intact gut structure as nature intended will prevent this confusion from ever occurring. After all, if our gut isn't leaky, then step 2 in this 3-step process won't ever occur, and so the cycle will be interrupted. Therefore, preventing a leaky gut is the best way to prevent autoimmunity. And as we saw previously, dysbiosis leads to leaky gut, so we've got to prevent that too. So that does it for part 3. At this point, I'd like to encourage you to rewatch any of the videos that you may need to if you're feeling confused about any of the concepts so far. You'll need to grasp these pretty well in order to get the most out of our final installment, part 4, where we'll talk about how so many people go wrong in trying to tackle these problems and where you can effect some really meaningful change quickly. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.